The old Honda Civic pulled up to the strip mall parking lot just as the sun began setting behind the buildings. Inside the car, two 16-year-old boys sat quietly, both staring at the same building through the windshield. The neon sign flickered, above the storefront reading Dragon Valley Martial Arts Academy in bright red letters. "You boys ready for this?" their mother asked from the driver's seat, turning around to look at her twin sons. Both boys had the same nervous expression on their faces, the kind that showed they wanted to be anywhere else but here. The twins, Kevin and Kyle, nodded slowly. They had always been the quiet type, preferring to spend their time with books rather than sports. Moving to this new town 3 weeks ago had been hard enough, but now their mother thought martial arts classes would help them make friends and build confidence. "Remember what I told you," she continued, her voice gentle but firm. "This isn't just about learning to fight. It's about discipline, respect, and finding your inner strength." Kevin, the older twin by 12 minutes, grabbed his gym bag from the floor. "We know, Mom. We'll be fine." But as they walked toward the building, both boys felt anything but fine. Through the large windows they could see people in white uniforms, moving around, some throwing kicks and punches, others practicing what looked like complicated dance moves. The sound of yelling and the sharp crack of boards breaking echoed from inside. The bell above the door chimed as they entered. The smell of sweat and cleaning products filled their noses immediately. The walls were covered with certificates, trophies, and photos of students in various poses. A large mirror covered one entire wall, reflecting the training area where about 20 people were practicing. "Can I help you?" A woman behind the front desk smiled at them. Her name tag read, "Lisa, Assistant Instructor." "We're here for the beginner class," Kyle said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ah, you must be the Thompson twins. Your mother called earlier. I'm so glad you decided to join us." Lisa handed them each a folded white uniform. "These are your GIs. That's what we call the uniforms. The changing room is over there. Class starts in 10 minutes. As the twins changed clothes, they could hear the advanced class finishing up their session. Through the thin wall, they heard someone shouting commands and the sound of feet moving quickly across the floor. "I don't know about this," Kevin whispered to his brother as he tied the white belt around his waist. "Come on, we promised Mom we'd try," Kyle whispered back, though he looked just as uncomfortable. When they emerged from the changing room, they immediately noticed how different they looked from everyone else. Their uniforms were bright white and stiff, clearly brand new. Most of the other students had uniforms that looked worn and comfortable, with various colored belts around their waists. But what really caught their attention were the 3 students, wearing black belts. These weren't just any students. They moved with a confidence that made everyone else seem like beginners. The tallest one had broad shoulders and arms that looked like he spent hours in the gym. The second one was shorter but moved like a dancer, every step calculated and smooth. The third had a cocky smile and kept showing off different kicks while the others watched. "All right, everyone, gather around." A man in his 40s wearing a black uniform with red trim walked to the center of the room. His voice carried authority, and everyone immediately stopped what they were doing. "I'm Sensei Rivera, and I'll be your instructor." The twins found themselves standing at the back of the group trying to blend in. They noticed how some of the other beginners looked nervous too, but not as much as they felt. "Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that this dojo is built on 3 principles," Sensei Rivera continued, his eyes scanning the group. "Respect, discipline, and perseverance. You will respect your fellow students, you will maintain discipline in your training, and you will persevere through challenges." Kevin and Kyle exchanged glances. These were the same principles their grandfather had taught them, though in different words. Their grandfather, Pops as they called him, had been a Marine who served 3 tours overseas. Every summer since they were 8 years old, he had trained them in his backyard. But Pops never called it martial arts. He called it being prepared for life. He taught them how to move quietly, how to stay calm under pressure, and how to defend themselves if they ever needed to. He made them run laps around his property, do push-ups until their arms shook, and practice the same movements. over and over until they were perfect. "We're not training you to be fighters," Pops used to say while they caught their breath after a particularly tough session. "We're training you to be protectors." Big difference. The twins had never told anyone about their training with Pops. It felt like their secret, something special between them and their grandfather. Besides, they never thought of themselves as fighters. They were just two quiet kids who happened to know how to throw a punch. "Let's start with basic stances," Sensei Rivera announced, pulling the twins back to the present. For the next hour, they learned how to stand, how to bow, and how to move their feet in simple patterns. The twins found it easy. Their grandfather had taught them similar movements years ago. But they were careful not to show off or draw attention to themselves. During water breaks, they noticed the three black belts watching them. Not in a friendly way, but like they were sizing them up. The twins pretended not to notice and kept to themselves. "Not bad for first-timers," one of the black belts said as he walked past them during a break. His tone wasn't exactly mean, but it wasn't friendly either. After class, as everyone was leaving, the twins overheard the same black belt talking to his friends near the door. "Did you see those new kids? They think they know what they're doing already." "Yeah, I noticed that too. They'll learn soon enough. Maybe we should help them understand how things work around here." The twins pretended they hadn't heard anything and quickly gathered their things. As they walked to the car where their mother was waiting, Kyle looked back at the building. "Did you hear what they said?" "Yeah," Kevin replied quietly. "But Pops always said to choose your battles wisely." Their mother noticed their quiet mood on the drive home. "How was it? Did you like it?" "It was fine," Kevin said, though both twins were thinking about the black belts and their conversation. That night, lying in their beds in their new room, the twins talked about what had happened. "Do you think we should tell them about Pops?" Kyle asked in the darkness. "No," Kevin replied firmly. "Remember what he used to say? A wise warrior keeps his weapons hidden until he needs them." Neither twin could sleep easily that night. They both had the feeling that their time at the dojo was going to be more complicated than their mother had hoped. But they also knew that Pops had prepared them for situations exactly like this. As they finally drifted off to sleep, both boys were thinking the same thing. They just wanted to learn martial arts and make friends. They had no idea that some people saw their quiet confidence as a challenge, or that their secret training would soon become very important. The next morning, they woke up sore but determined. They had promised their mother they would stick with the classes, and they always kept their promises. Besides, they both knew that Pops would have wanted them to face whatever came next with courage and dignity. What they didn't know was that the three black belts had been talking about them long after they left, making plans to test these new students and show them exactly where they stood in the dojo's pecking order. The second week at Dragon Valley Martial Arts Academy started the same way as the first. Kevin and Kyle arrived early, changed into their still crisp white uniforms, and took their usual spots at the back of the class. But something felt different this time. The three black belts, who they had learned were named Tyler, Brandon, and Alex, seemed to be paying more attention to them. Not the good kind of attention either. During warm-up exercises, Tyler made his way over to where the twins were stretching. "You guys are back," he said, his voice carrying a tone that wasn't quite friendly. "I thought maybe you'd quit after last week." "Why would we quit?" Kyle asked, genuinely confused. Tyler shrugged. "Most people realize pretty quickly if they're cut out for this or not." Kevin and Kyle exchanged glances but said nothing. They continued their stretching routine, the same one Pops had taught them years ago. What they didn't notice was how smoothly they moved compared to the other beginners, or how their balance seemed effortless. But the black belts noticed. As Sensei Rivera called the class to attention, Brandon whispered something to Alex that made both of them smirk. The twins were too far away to hear what was said, but they felt the weight of their stares. "Today we're going to work on basic combinations," Sensei Rivera announced. "I want everyone to pair up. Beginners with beginners, advanced students help where needed." Usually students paired up with people they knew or felt comfortable with. The twins naturally started to pair with each other, as they had done the week before. But before they could move together, Tyler stepped between them. "Hey, new guy," he said to Kevin. "Why don't you pair with me? I'll show you how it's really done." It wasn't really a request. Kevin looked at his brother, who was now being approached by Brandon. They both understood what was happening, but neither wanted to cause trouble. "Sure," Kevin said quietly. For the next 30 minutes, Tyler made Kevin's life miserable in small ways that Sensei Rivera couldn't see. When they practiced blocking techniques, Tyler's punches came a little too fast and a little too hard. When Kevin successfully blocked them, Tyler would say things like "lucky guess" or "you won't see the next one coming." During kicking drills, Tyler would stand too close, forcing Kevin to adjust his technique. When Kevin adapted smoothly, Tyler got annoyed. "Where'd you learn to move like that?" Tyler demanded during a water break. "I don't know what you mean," Kevin replied honestly. To him, the movements felt natural, like walking or breathing. Meanwhile, Kyle was having his own problems with Brandon. During sparring practice, Brandon kept accidentally making contact when they were supposed to just practice the motions. A light tap to the ribs here, a bump to the shoulder there. Nothing that would cause real injury, but enough to send a message. "Oops, sorry," Brandon would say with a fake smile after each contact. "Still learning to control my power, you know." But Kyle noticed something interesting. Even though Brandon was trying to intimidate him, Kyle could see his movements. Coming from a mile away, Brandon telegraphed his punches with his shoulders, dropped his guard when he kicked, and left himself open after every combination. Pops had taught them to read opponents like books. Watch their eyes, watch their breathing, watch how they shift, their weight. He used to say during their backyard training sessions, "Your opponent will tell you what they're going to do before they do it." The twins could read Brandon and Tyler easily, but they kept this knowledge to themselves. The real trouble started during the third week. Alex, who had been mostly quiet during the first 2 weeks, decided to join in the harassment. During kata practice, where students performed choreographed sequences of movements, he positioned himself right behind the twins. As Kevin and Kyle performed the basic kata they had learned, Alex provided unwanted commentary. "Your stance is too wide," he said loudly enough for others to hear, "and your arms are in the wrong position." Other students started looking over, some snickering. The twins tried to ignore it and continue with their practice. "Are you guys even paying attention in class?" Alex continued. "Because it looks like you're just making stuff up." This was particularly frustrating because the twins knew their kata was correct. Pops had taught them similar forms years ago, and their muscle memory was perfect. But they couldn't explain this without revealing their background. Sensei Rivera was working with the advanced students on the other side of the room, preparing them for an upcoming tournament. He was focused on their complex techniques and didn't notice what was happening with the beginners. The harassment got worse during partner drills. When it was Kevin's turn to practice with Alex, every correction came with a physical adjustment that was rougher than necessary. "Your guard is too low," Alex would say, then push Kevin's arms up harder than needed. "Your stance is wrong," followed by a kick to Kevin's foot to fix his position. Kyle watched his brother endure this treatment and felt his own anger rising. But Pops had taught them about controlling emotions. "Anger makes you stupid," their grandfather used to say, "and stupid gets you hurt." During the fourth week, the situation escalated further. Tyler started making comments about their appearance. "You guys always look so serious," he said during one class. "Maybe you should smile more. This is supposed to be fun." When the twins didn't respond, he got bolder. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue? Or maybe you just think you're too good to talk to us?" Brandon joined in. "Yeah, they act like they know everything already, like they don't need to be here." This was completely untrue. The twins were always respectful, always listened to instructions, and never acted superior to anyone, but their natural ability was starting to show despite their efforts to hide it. When other beginners struggled with balance during kicks, Kevin and Kyle remained steady. When others got tired during long training sessions, the twins barely broke a sweat. When learning new techniques, they picked them up faster than their classmates. To the black belts, this looked like arrogance. To the twins, it was just the result of years of conditioning with Pops. The breaking point came during a particularly busy class. The dojo was crowded, with both beginner and advanced students sharing the space. During a water break, Tyler approached the twins again. "You know what I think?" he said, speaking loud enough for several people to hear. "I think you guys are just here to waste everyone's time. You don't take this seriously." Kevin finally spoke up. "We take it very seriously. We're here to learn, just like everyone else." "Really?" Tyler's voice got louder. "Because it looks to me like you think you already know everything. Other students, we're starting to watch now." Some of the beginners looked uncomfortable, while a few of the intermediate students seemed to be enjoying the confrontation. "We don't think that at all," Kyle said calmly. "Then prove it," Brandon said, stepping up beside Tyler. "Show us what you've got." The twins looked at each other. They both knew this was heading somewhere they didn't want to go. But they also knew that backing down now would make things worse. "We're not here to prove anything," Kevin said carefully. "We're here to learn martial arts," Alex laughed. "Martial arts? You can barely do a proper stance." This was the final straw. Not because it was true, it wasn't, but because it was said in front of other students who were now staring at them like they were some kind of joke. Kyle felt something shift inside him. For weeks, they had endured insults, physical harassment, and public humiliation. They had stayed quiet out of respect for their mother's wishes and Pops's teachings about choosing battles wisely. But Pops had also taught them something else. There comes a time when staying quiet becomes the same as giving up on yourself. "You want to see our stance?" Kyle asked quietly. The room got quieter. Even some of the advanced students stopped their conversations to listen. "Yeah," Tyler said with a cocky grin. "Show us what you've got, beginner." Kyle looked at his brother. One more time. Kevin gave him the slightest nod. They both knew what was about to happen. What the black belts didn't realize was that they had just challenged two students who had been holding back their true abilities for weeks. Students who had been trained by a Marine veteran who believed that real strength should never be displayed unless absolutely necessary. The twins had tried to avoid this moment. But now it was here, and everyone in the dojo was about to learn that the two quiet beginners they had been picking on were anything but helpless. The entire dojo had gone quiet. Even the advanced students practicing on the other side of the room stopped their training to see what was happening. Kevin and Kyle stood in the center of a growing circle of people, all eyes on them. Tyler crossed his arms and smiled confidently. "Come on then, show us this perfect stance you think you have." Kyle took a deep breath and settled into position. Without thinking, he dropped into the same fighting stance Pops had drilled into them thousands of times. His feet were perfectly spaced, his weight balanced, his hands positioned exactly where they should be. It looked effortless, like he had been doing it his whole life, because he had been. A few of the intermediate students exchanged glances. Even to their untrained eyes, Kyle's stance looked different from what they had been learning in class. It looked real. Brandon frowned. "That's not how we learned it." "Maybe because you haven't learned it right," Kevin said quietly, settling into the same stance next to his brother. The twins looked like mirror images of each other, both perfectly balanced, both completely relaxed, yet ready for anything. There was something about the way they carried themselves that made the room feel different. Tyler's confident smile started to fade. He had expected to see the same awkward, unbalanced stances that most beginners struggled with. Instead, he was looking at two students who looked like they had been training for years. "Where did you learn that?" he demanded. "Our grandfather taught us," Kyle replied simply. "Your grandfather?" Alex laughed, but it sounded forced. "What does your grandfather know about martial arts?" Kevin and Kyle exchanged a look. They had never talked about Pops with anyone outside their family. Their training with him had always felt private, sacred even. But now, surrounded by hostile faces and challenged publicly, they felt like they owed their grandfather's memory more than just silence. "He was a Marine," Kevin said. 3 tours overseas. He taught us how to defend ourselves." The laughter in the room died completely. Even some of the advanced students who had been smirking earlier suddenly looked more serious. But Tyler wasn't. ready to back down. He had spent too much time building his reputation as the top student among the intermediate ranks, and he wasn't about to let two beginners make him look foolish. "Marines don't know real martial arts," he said loudly. "They just know how to fight dirty." The words hit Kevin and Kyle like a physical blow. Pops had died just 6 months ago, and their grief was still fresh. Hearing someone disrespect his memory and his service made something snap inside both of them. "Don't talk about our grandfather," Kyle said, his voice still quiet but carrying a warning that everyone in the room could hear. "Or what?" Tyler stepped closer, sensing he had found a weakness to exploit. "What are you going to do about it?" That's when Sensei Rivera finally noticed what was happening. He had been working with the tournament team in the corner, but the unusual quiet in the room had caught his attention. "What's going on here?" he asked, walking over to the circle of students. "Just having a little conversation with our new friends," Tyler said, his tone suddenly respectful in front of the instructor. "They were showing us some moves their grandfather taught them." Sensei Rivera looked at the twins who were still in their perfect fighting stances. His trained eye immediately recognized what he was seeing. These weren't the stances of beginners trying to imitate what they had learned in class. These were the stances of students who had been properly trained by someone who knew what they were doing. "Interesting," he said carefully. "And what did your grandfather teach you?" Before either twin could answer, Brandon spoke up. "They claim he was some kind of Marine instructor or something." "He was a Marine," Kevin corrected firmly. "And he did teach us. Every summer for 8 years. Sensei Rivera raised an eyebrow. In his 20 years of teaching, he had met plenty of students who claimed to have secret training or special knowledge. Most of them were just trying to sound impressive. But looking at these two boys, he wasn't so sure. "Would you be willing to demonstrate some of what he taught you?" he asked. The twins looked at each other uncertainly. They had spent weeks trying to blend in, trying not to draw attention to themselves. The last thing they wanted was to show off or make other students feel bad. But Tyler made the decision for them. "Yeah, show us," he said with a mocking tone. "Let's see what your grandfather's military training looks like compared to real martial arts." The insult to Pops was too much. Kyle nodded to his brother, and they both knew what had to happen. "Next, okay," Kyle said simply. What happened next would be talked about in the dojo for years to come. Kevin and Kyle moved to the center of the circle and faced each other. Without any discussion or planning, they began to demonstrate the kata their grandfather had taught them. But this wasn't the simple, basic kata they had been learning in class. This was something else entirely. They moved together like they were reading each other's minds, every technique flowing smoothly into the next. Their blocks were sharp and precise, their strikes controlled but powerful. They demonstrated throws, joint locks, and defensive techniques that most of the students in the room had never seen before. But what really caught everyone's attention was how they moved. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation, no awkwardness. Every technique was performed with the kind of precision that only comes from years of constant practice. The room was completely silent except for the sound of their uniforms moving through, the air and their controlled breathing. Even Tyler, Brandon, and Alex had stopped their commentary. When the twins finished their demonstration, they bowed to each other and then to Sensei Rivera, exactly as Pops had taught them. For a long moment, nobody said anything. Finally, Sensei Rivera spoke. "How long did you train with your grandfather?" "Every summer from when we were 8 until..." Kevin's voice trailed off. "Until he passed away 6 months ago," Kyle finished quietly. The instructor nodded slowly. In his experience, it took most students years to develop the kind of skill and coordination he had just witnessed. These boys were clearly much more advanced than their white belt suggested. But Tyler wasn't finished. Being shown up in front of the entire class had wounded his pride, and he was looking for a way to regain face. "That was pretty," he said loudly. "But kata is just dancing. Real martial arts is about sparring. Anyone can look good when they're fighting air." Several students shifted uncomfortably. Even they could tell that Tyler was pushing too hard, but he seemed determined to prove his point. "Tyler," Sensei Rivera said warningly. But Tyler ignored the warning. I mean, if they're really as good as they think they are, they should be able to handle some actual contact. Kevin and Kyle looked at their instructor, unsure how to respond. They didn't want to fight, but they also didn't want to back down. From another challenge, Sensei Rivera found himself in a difficult position. On one hand, he could see that Tyler was being unnecessarily aggressive. On the other hand, sparring was a normal part of training, and if the twins were as advanced as they appeared to be, they should be able to handle it. "Are you comfortable with some light sparring?" he asked the twins. Before they could answer, Tyler stepped forward. "I'll spar with one of them, just to see what they've really got." The twins looked at each other. They both knew that Tyler wasn't interested in light sparring. He wanted to prove that their demonstration was just for show, that they couldn't handle real combat. What Tyler didn't understand was that everything Pops had taught them was designed for real combat. The old Marine had never taught them how to spar for points or how to look good in demonstrations. He had taught them how to end fights quickly and definitively. "All right," Kyle said, stepping forward. "But we keep it light, right?" Tyler grinned. "Of course, just friendly sparring." But as they moved to the center of the room and faced each other, everyone present could feel the tension. This wasn't going to be friendly at all. Sensei Rivera positioned himself where he could see both students clearly. "Light contact only. I want to see technique, not power. Ready?" Both students nodded and settled into their fighting stances. Tyler's stance was textbook perfect for the style taught at the dojo, balanced, defensive, ready for the long exchanges common in tournament sparring. Kyle's stance was something else, entirely. It looked similar, but there was something different about it. Something that suggested he wasn't planning on a long, drawn-out fight. "Begin," Sensei Rivera said. What happened next would change everything at Dragon Valley Martial Arts Academy. Tyler came out swinging. The moment Sensei Rivera said begin, Tyler launched into a series of kicks and punches that he had been perfecting for 3 years. High kick, low kick, spinning back fist, all the flashy techniques that had impressed other students and earned him his black belt. But Kyle wasn't there anymore. Where Tyler expected to find his target, he found only empty air. Kyle had moved so smoothly that several students blinked and missed it entirely. 1 second he was directly in front of Tyler. The next he was standing slightly to the side, completely untouched. "What the?" Tyler muttered, spinning around to find his opponent. Kyle stood calmly, his hands still in the same defensive position, breathing normally. It was like Tyler's aggressive combination had never happened. "Lucky dodge," Tyler said, trying to sound confident, but sweat was already forming on his forehead and not from the physical exertion. He attacked again, this time with more control. A straight punch followed by a knee strike, then a grab for Kyle's uniform. These were techniques that worked against other students, techniques that had earned him respect and fear in the dojo. But Kyle wasn't other students. Again, Tyler found himself striking air. Kyle had moved just enough to avoid each technique, his movement so small and precise that it looked effortless. He wasn't running or jumping away. He was simply not where Tyler expected him to be. From the circle of watching students, whispers began to spread. "How is he doing that? Did you see how fast he moved? Tyler can't even touch him." Kevin watched his brother with pride. This was exactly what Pops had taught them. Don't meet force with force. Don't waste energy on big movements. Just be where your opponent isn't. Fighting isn't about being stronger or faster, Pops used to say during their training sessions. It's about being smarter. Let your opponent tire himself out, then strike when he's vulnerable. Tyler was getting frustrated now. He had thrown dozens of techniques and none of them had even come close to connecting. Worse, Kyle hadn't even tried to attack back. He was just standing there, moving slightly, making Tyler look foolish. "Stop. Running away!" Tyler shouted, throwing a wild haymaker that Kyle avoided by simply leaning back. "I'm not running," Kyle replied calmly. "I'm just not standing still." This made Tyler even angrier. He had been training for years, had earned his black belt, had the respect of everyone in the dojo, and now this beginner was making him look like an amateur. He decided to end it with his best technique, a jumping kick that he had knocked out several opponents with during tournaments. It was powerful, fast, and had never failed him. Tyler leaped into the air, his leg extended toward Kyle's head with enough force to knock him unconscious if it connected. But it didn't connect. Kyle had seen the kick coming from the moment Tyler shifted his weight. Pops had taught them to read body language, to see attacks before they happened. As Tyler flew through the air, Kyle simply stepped to the side and let momentum carry his opponent past him. Tyler landed hard, off balance, and completely exposed. And that's when Kyle finally moved. In one smooth motion, Kyle stepped behind Tyler and gently placed his hand on Tyler's shoulder, stopping him from falling completely. At the same time, his other hand moved to Tyler's wrist, controlling his arm. To everyone watching, it looked like Kyle was just helping Tyler keep his balance. But Tyler felt the truth. Kyle had complete control over his body. One small twist of his wrist, one slight adjustment of pressure, and Tyler would be on the ground in serious pain. "Do you want to continue?" Kyle asked quietly, his voice calm and respectful. Tyler tried to pull away and found that he couldn't move. Kyle's grip looked gentle, almost friendly, but it was absolutely unbreakable. Tyler realized with shock that he was completely helpless. "Let me go," he whispered, all the arrogance gone from his voice. Kyle immediately released him and took a step back, bowing slightly. "Thank you for the sparring session." The room was dead silent. Everyone had seen what happened, but most of them didn't fully understand it. Tyler had thrown everything he had at Kyle, and Kyle had barely moved. Then in one moment, Kyle had shown that he could have ended the fight anytime he wanted to. Sensei Rivera stepped forward, his face thoughtful. In his 20 years of teaching, he had rarely seen such a display of skill and control. Kyle had demonstrated not just superior technique, but the wisdom to use only as much force as necessary. "That was impressive," he said slowly. "Both of you. Tyler, you showed good spirit and determination. Kyle, your control and technique were excellent." But Tyler wasn't listening to the praise. He was staring at Kyle with a mixture of confusion and embarrassment. Everything he thought he knew about fighting had just been turned upside down. "How did you do that?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Kyle looked uncomfortable with all the attention. "My grandfather taught us that fighting isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting yourself and others. But I couldn't touch you," Tyler said, still trying to understand what had happened. "You weren't trying to hurt me," Kyle replied. "You were trying to prove something. There's a difference." Kevin watched his brother handle the situation with the same grace that Pops had taught them. Never humiliate an opponent, never gloat over victory, always show respect for those who test you. But Brandon and Alex weren't ready to accept what they had seen. They had been counting on Tyler to put the twins in their place, and instead, their leader had been completely outclassed. "That was just lucky," Brandon said loudly. Tyler was going easy on him. Several students turned to look at Brandon with disbelief. They had all seen the same thing, Tyler throwing everything he had while Kyle barely seemed to be trying. "You think you can do better?" Kevin asked, his voice quiet but carrying clearly across the room. Brandon's face flushed. He had been hoping to avoid this exact situation, but now he was trapped by his own words. I didn't say that," he stammered. "Yes, you did," Alex said, apparently deciding to throw his friend under the bus rather than face the twins himself. "You said Tyler was going easy. Prove it." Brandon looked around the room, seeing the expectant faces of his classmates. He had built his reputation on being tough, on backing up Tyler in confrontations with other students. Now that reputation was on the line. "Fine," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Let's see if you can do that again." Kevin stepped forward, but Kyle put a hand on his arm. "I'll do it," Kyle said. "But I want everyone to understand something first." He turned to face the circle of students, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Our grandfather didn't teach us to fight, he taught us to protect. He taught us that real strength comes from knowing when not to use your power." Kyle looked directly at Brandon. "If we do this, it's not about winning or losing, it's about learning." Brandon nodded, though he looked increasingly nervous. And if anyone gets hurt, Kyle continued, it stops immediately. We're all training partners here, not enemies. Sensei Rivera considered stopping the demonstration, but he could see that this was about more than just sparring. This was about respect, about understanding what martial arts really meant. Same rules as before, he announced. Light contact, technique over power. Brandon and Kyle faced each other in the center of the circle. Brandon tried to look confident, but everyone could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He had just watched his friend get completely dominated, and now it was his turn. Ready? Sensei Rivera asked. Both students nodded. Begin. Brandon had learned from watching Tyler's mistakes. Instead of rushing forward with flashy techniques, he approached cautiously, trying to feel out his opponent's defenses. But Kyle wasn't interested in a long, drawn-out fight. He could see that Brandon was scared, that he was only fighting because he felt he had to. There was no honor in prolonging his embarrassment. Brandon threw a careful jab, testing Kyle's reactions. Kyle blocked it easily, then stepped forward into Brandon's guard. Before Brandon could react, Kyle had trapped his arm and swept his leg, sending him gently to the ground. It was over in less than 5 seconds. Kyle immediately helped Brandon to his feet, bowing respectfully. Thank you for the match. Brandon stood there stunned. He had barely realized the fight had started before it was over. The entire dojo was silent for a long moment. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, came the sound of slow clapping. It was one of the advanced students, showing his appreciation for the skill they had just witnessed. Soon, the entire room was applauding. Not just for Kyle's victory, but for the way he had handled himself, with respect, control, and humility. Tyler and Brandon stood together, both of them looking at the twins with new eyes. The arrogance and hostility that had defined their relationship for weeks was gone, replaced by something that looked like respect. I think, said Sensei Rivera, his voice carrying over the applause. We all have a lot to learn from each other. The next morning, Kevin and Kyle walked into the dojo expecting everything to be different. They had spent the night talking about what happened, wondering if Tyler, Brandon, and Alex would hold grudges or try to get revenge somehow. What they found instead surprised them completely. Tyler was already there, practicing basic forms by himself in the corner. When he saw the twins enter, he stopped what he was doing and walked over to them. Hey, he said, his voice different from the cocky tone they were used to. Can I talk to you guys? Kevin and Kyle exchanged glances but nodded. I wanted to apologize, Tyler continued, looking genuinely uncomfortable. For the way I treated you these past weeks, I was being an idiot. The twins weren't sure how to respond. They had expected anger or resentment, not an apology. You don't need to apologize, Kyle said. We understand why you were suspicious of us. No, I do need to apologize, Tyler insisted. I was threatened by you guys, and instead of trying to learn from you, I tried to tear you down. That's not what martial arts is supposed to be about. He paused, running his hand through his hair. Last night I went home and thought about everything that happened. I realized that in 3 years of training I had learned how to fight, but I had never learned how to be a martial artist. Kevin felt a familiar echo of his grandfather's words. Pops had always said there was a difference between knowing techniques and understanding the art. Would you? Tyler hesitated. Would you be willing to teach me? Not the fighting stuff. I mean the other things. The way you stayed calm, the way you controlled the situation. I want to learn that. Before either twin could answer, Brandon appeared beside them. He looked even more uncomfortable than Tyler, but equally sincere. I'd like to learn too, he said quietly, if you're willing to teach me. Over the next few days, word of what had happened spread throughout the dojo, but instead of the twins being seen as troublemakers or show-offs, they found themselves being approached by other students who wanted to learn from them. It started with simple questions during breaks. How did you move so fast without looking like you were hurrying? What were you thinking about during the sparring match? Can you show me that blocking technique you used? Kevin and Kyle found themselves in an unexpected position. They had come to the dojo to learn, but now other students were looking to them as teachers. Sensei Rivera watched this development with interest. He had been teaching long enough to recognize natural leaders when he saw them, and the twins had something special. They had skill, but more importantly, they had the wisdom to use that skill responsibly. After a week of watching the twins help other students, he made a decision. Kevin, Kyle, he called them over after class one evening. "I'd like to speak with you." The twins approached their instructor, wondering if they were in trouble for something. "I've been watching how you interact with the other students," Sensei Rivera began. "You have a gift for teaching. Have you ever considered becoming assistant instructors?" The twins looked at each other in surprise. They had only been at the dojo for a month and they were still wearing white belts. "But we're beginners," Kevin pointed out. Sensei Rivera smiled. "Your belts are white, but your knowledge is not beginner level. I've been teaching for 20 years, and I know real skill when I see it. More importantly, I know character when I see it." He gestured toward the main training area, where Tyler was helping a newer student with his stance. "Look at what's happening in my dojo. A month ago, Tyler was arrogant and dismissive of newer students. Now he's one of the most helpful people here. That change didn't happen because of his regular training. It happened because of what he learned from you." The twins were quiet for a moment, thinking about their grandfather and what he would want them to do. "What would we have to do?" Kyle asked. "Help me teach the beginner classes. Share what you know about discipline, respect, and control. Show other students that martial arts is about more than just fighting." That weekend, Kevin and Kyle talked to their mother about Sensei Rivera's offer. "I think Pops would be proud," she said, wiping away a tear. "He always said you boys had the hearts of teachers." The following Monday, the twins returned to the dojo wearing new belts, not black belts, but brown belts that Sensei Rivera had awarded them after testing their knowledge and skills privately. More importantly, they wore assistant instructor patches on their uniforms. Some students were surprised to see beginners promoted so quickly, but anyone who had been present during the sparring demonstrations understood why. During their first class as assistant instructors, Kevin and Kyle found themselves working with a group of brand new students, including a shy 10-year-old girl who reminded them of themselves when they first started training with Pops. "The most important thing to remember," Kyle told the group, "is that you're not here to compete with each other. You're here to help each other get better." "But what if someone picks on us?" the little girl asked quietly. Kevin knelt down to her level. "Then you remember that real strength isn't about hurting other people. It's about protecting yourself and others. And if you train hard and learn well, you'll have that strength when you need it." As the weeks went by, the atmosphere in the dojo changed completely. The culture of intimidation and hierarchy that had existed before was replaced by one of mutual support and respect. Tyler, Brandon, and Alex became some of the twins' best students and closest friends. They learned not just new techniques, but new ways of thinking about martial arts and about themselves. "I used to think being tough meant being mean," Tyler admitted to Kevin one day. "Now I realize that the toughest people are usually the quietest ones." 6 months after their first day at Dragon Valley Martial Arts Academy, Kevin and Kyle stood in front of the entire dojo during a belt promotion ceremony. They were receiving their black belts, but more importantly, they were being recognized as full instructors. "These young men," Sensei Rivera announced to the gathered students and families, "have shown us all what it truly means to be martial artists. They have demonstrated that real strength comes not from the ability to defeat others, but from the wisdom to lift others up." As the ceremony concluded and families gathered for pictures, the twins found themselves surrounded by students they had helped train. Tyler was there with his little sister who had joined the beginner class. Brandon brought his cousin who was interested in learning martial arts. Alex had convinced his best friend to try a class. "You know what's funny?" Kyle said to his brother as they watched their students laughing and talking together. "What's that? We came here to learn martial arts, but I think we ended up learning something more important." Kevin nodded, understanding exactly what his brother meant. "Pops always said that the best way to honor what you've learned is to pass it on to others." "Would have loved this," Kyle said, looking around at the community they had helped create. As they drove home that evening, Their mother asked them about their day. "It was good," Kevin said. "We had 3 new students start today." "And Tyler helped me teach the intermediate class," Kyle added. "He's becoming a really good instructor." Their mother smiled in the rearview mirror. "Your grandfather always said that the mark of a true teacher is when your students become teachers themselves." The twins nodded, thinking about how much their lives had changed since that first nervous day at the dojo. They had come looking for confidence and friendship, and they had found something much more valuable: the understanding that true strength comes from serving others. At Dragon Valley Martial Arts Academy, the culture of bullying and intimidation was gone forever, replaced by a legacy of respect, discipline, and mutual support that would influence students for generations to come. And it all started with 2 quiet boys who had learned from their grandfather that the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies but from turning them into friends.